Alright, so here we go. Now it's time to create these drapes. So we've got the valances on the windows, we've got the window shades that roll up and down. Now what we need is to create these drapes here. Okay, you can see that they're very organic. It's not like creating a window valance or even the shades. These things have very free-form flow to them, so to speak. They're very organic. They're fabric, so it's a whole different ball game as to how you model this kind of stuff. Okay, but I'm going to show you some techniques and some tools with 3ds Max that we can take advantage of to make a job that would normally be difficult as easy and as quick as possible. Okay, so this is what we have to create, these window drapes. So based on the reference image, we've got something good to go on here. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to start off with this center window here, like I've done before in the past. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create myself a box. Just bring that up like that. Okay, kind of place it in front of the window right there. Something like that. And you know what I'll do? Just to make sure it's aligned properly. I'm going to align it to that valance right there. I'm going to go center and center. I'm not going to align it in the Z, just X and Y is fine. And I'll hit OK. Then I'm going to take this box and convert it to an editable poly. I'm going to select the front poly and hit Control and I to invert the selection and select all the other polygons. And I'm going to delete those, so we end up with just this object here, which is going to essentially become our window panel. Okay. I'm also going to take the center point, the center pivot point, and I'm going to place it in the middle of the object here, like so. And that's pretty good. Okay, so this is the way that I'm going to do this. I'm going to take the top and bottom edges. I'm going to connect them one time down the middle. I'm going to take the left half here and delete it. And I'm going to create basically one half panel over here. Okay, I'm going to take this edge and move it in just a little bit like so. And I'm going to take the top edge here. And I'm going to move that up. So it's going to go underneath on the inside hollow part of the valance. Remember that? That was the whole point of creating that, by the way, in case you're wondering. Okay. You can see right here it's kind of penetrating through. So I'm just going to take that edge right there and just move it just a little bit right there. So we end up with a little tiny gap right there like that. Okay. So the curtain goes inside the actual valance, as you can see. Alright. Okay. So I've got that done. I need to take this edge at the end and move it high, just a little bit off the ground. I can't see ground right now, but trust me, the floor of our house is about right there, so I just moved it up. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the top and bottom edges here, and now that I have a curtain panel, what I can do is actually pretty simple. I can go ahead and make a connection here, and I'm going to connect this a lot of times, okay? I'm going to do something like maybe, I don't know if I should do maybe 12, maybe I should do more. I'm going to go with 12, okay, and hit OK. Okay, now that I've got 12 connections there, those 12 connections are going to be pleats. If you're familiar with curtains or you're an interior designer, you know what pleats on a curtain are. If you don't, you're about to find out. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this edge here. I'm going to go to my graphite modeling tools, and this is why the graphite modeling tools are so magnificent. I can go over here and use my dot loop tool, and when I use that, I'm going to go down here, use my ring tools. I'm going to use my dot ring tool, and when I select my dot ring tool, I can select every other edge of this object, as you can see, which is fantastic. Because now I can take all these edges and I can just move them back like this. Now I'm going to keep an eye on the top here, make sure it doesn't penetrate through to something like this. And I end up with this kind of a shape. See these pleats right there? Just like the curtain in real life. That's going to give me my initial shape to go ahead and get started with this. But I'm going to need more geometry for this because this just isn't enough. So I'm going to select all of these edges here. I'm going to use the connect tool. And I'm going to connect that maybe about 8 times will probably work out pretty good. And I'm going to hit OK. Right. Now that I've created my base geometry, I can actually start to to work with this and make it look more like a curtain, because right now it just doesn't look too much like a curtain. So what I need to do is I need to take my pivot point. I'm going to take this pivot point, I'm going to snap it to the side over here. Okay, doesn't really matter where exactly. And I'm just going to scale this in like this. And you can see it scales kind of like an accordion, so you can stretch it out, or you can bring it in like this. And that's how the image is. You can see that the drapes, you can probably pull them together into the middle here to basically cover up the window, or you can just pull them off to the side like this, and you end up with this sort of pleated shape here, okay, almost like an accordion. Alright, so now that I scaled them in and put them together like this, what I can do is I can turn on NURBS toggle and get a smoother effect. But if you remember, when we first started this tutorial, the first set of videos, I talked about this, very important. NURBS toggle, when you're working with a very high-res mesh, is very slow and not optimized. It's not performance friendly. So what we should do instead is go to the modifiers, grab ourselves a subdivision surface modifier, grab the Turbo Smooth, which has better performance benefits to it. Okay? And what I'm going to do is go back to my Edit Poly over here in the modifier stack, and I'm going to turn on the Show End Result button down here so that I can see the Turbo Smooth on top of the object, so we end up with something like this. Okay? Now if I render this out, it looks kind of like a curtain, but something's wrong. It looks too uniform. It looks too perfect. Okay? Curtain like that just doesn't exist in real life. If we look at these drapes, you could see that they're kind of fluffed out. They're kind of randomized. They're very natural looking. They don't just go straight down perfectly, almost like if these things were made out of steel or some kind of metal. You can see they're very organic, very free-flowing, so to speak. And we need to imitate that here in the in 3ds Max. So the way that I'm going to do that is actually pretty interesting. Let me go back to my Turbo Smooth. I'm going to give this thing 2 iterations to make it smoother. And I can turn on Isoline Display here to make it easier to see. Okay? So if I render this out, it's very smooth and very nice, very silky smooth. But I want this to look a little bit more randomized, a little more like a real curtain. So the way I can do that is actually pretty easy. Let me show you how I can do that very easily. With the Edit Poly object over here in the modifier stack selected, I can go over here to my Graphite Modeling Tools, go to the Freeform category, and I can go to Paint Deform. And Paint Deform is really cool because we have all these different brushes that we can use to literally paint deformation and different types of surface characteristics to our objects. So for example, we can use the Push and Pull, which is going to do exactly as the name suggests. It'll push components, push vertices, and pull them apart. We can relax and soften. We can smudge, flatten. We can also exaggerate features. We can also go ahead and add noise and use the Pinch and Spread. The Pinch and Spread is just an awesome, awesome brush. They're all really good, but depending on the situation, you might want to use one or the other. So let's use the Exaggerate very quickly here, just to illustrate some points here. Okay. So the way we use this is we select a tool, and each tool has a few different shortcuts to it. For example, with the Exaggerate tool, we can select it. And you also notice, you probably can't see this in the video, but while you're working with Max on your system, on your workstation, you probably notice that you get this very large tooltip that pops up on the bottom and actually shows you a picture, an image of how this thing works. And it'll also show you the keyboard shortcuts while you're using the tool. So for example, with this one, we can hold down Shift to relax the mesh. We can hold down Control while we paint on a mesh to revert it. We can also hold down Control and Shift to resize the brush, and Shift and Alt changes the brush strength. Okay, so let me go ahead and use the Exaggerate brush over here. You can see the size of the brush is kind of big, so I'll hold down Control and Shift and then click and drag to make it smaller. You can see as I come in here, I can exaggerate some of these features just by painting on it. But I don't want to use that one. What I want to use is the Noise brush. Noise brush is really cool. We can come in here and just paint in random noise for this for the curtain. So you can see as I come in here, things look a little bit different. If I use Alt, it has the opposite effect. So if I use Alt, you notice it kind of pushes stuff in. If I don't use Alt, pushes it out. So we start to end up with these sort of random type effects. And you can see here when I start to render this out with the Turbo Smooth on, you can already see that it looks much more natural. a much more realistic looking than what we had before. So you can push this in, we can pull it, we can just move it around and end up with just these really, really cool effects. We can reduce the size of the brush so we can affect just a specific area. And really it's just a matter of coming in here and playing with this for a while. You could literally sit here and spend a good hour, if not more, painting this to your heart's content and just having some fun with it. Okay? Alright, so now that you've got that idea, I'm going to end this video here. In the next video, we're going to work on making this look very natural, random looking, and making it look more like a realistic curtain as opposed to a geometric object created in 3ds Max.